Welcome into Bucs Insider, coming to you from the Bucs studio, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with Bree Dix and Scott Smith. You know, this last week we all know was a very tough one for many reasons. We're going to get into that game, but we also have a very exciting one coming up this week we're going to talk about because, as you can tell, it's Creamsicle week. I like that we all took a different approach to it in this moment, but we're all rocking it. And Scott, though, he takes the cake with his shirt. But yes, as you can tell, it's Creamsicle week. All the graphics have been changed on everything. We've got big old flags outside that are, instead of our normal, gigantic, incredible Bucs flag, look at that. It's just beautiful on the flag lot. Those are all the little ones leading up to the giant, most gigantic Creamsicle flag known to man. It looks incredible. And yeah, Scott, he just had to show us up with his OG Creamsicle.
Yeah, this isn't a new purchase. This is from the early 90s. And
With
it even
his
has
name.
my name
With the name.
sewn in.
Again, it makes me think of the kids at school that have it written in their jackets in case they leave it behind to know that this was Scott's polo.
That was fair.
I love that. So yeah, again, it is Creamsicle week. We hope you guys are all going to be rocking it all week at work, wherever you're running errands. Hope you're coming to the game. It is going to be amazing. The stadium already is going to look incredible, and we think it's going to be a fun matchup as well. Before we get into that, of course, we got to talk a little bit about this previous game and everything that happened. So
let's make you talk about it.
Let's make me talk about that. Happy to help. I drew the short straw on this week for sure. I mean, of course, it's like there's a loss and then there's injury losses, and that's what was just so sad this week is, you know, being around the building, it's always hard after a loss. Everyone is very sad and really trying to make sure that they figure out how to move forward. But this week, it just felt heavier because of what happened to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and especially Chris Godwin. That was so hard to watch for so many people, and everyone loves Chris. He fought so hard to come back from the ACL. It was such a heart-wrenching thing. And so, but you know, the football world, everyone feels very bad for them. And also, please shout out to donating to his foundation, show him and his family some love. We all love Chris and his family so much and are wishing him nothing but the best. But of course, it's not like the season is canceled because we're sad that we have no wide receivers. So now, what does this mean moving forward, right? And this is you always hear the trope of the next man up. And I think that this is going to be such an interesting storyline to watch this week of what does next man up look like in this wide receiver room, because yes, guys have to step in, but no one is Mike Evans. No one is Chris Godwin. So I'm going to be fascinated to see what does Liam Cohen decide to do to try to make these guys, what is he going to do to the offense to make sure it is suiting these guys' strengths? Right. And then also, though, man, I'm excited to watch some of these young guys like Trey Palmer and Jaylen McMillan get these big-time reps in a really important division matchup. Because I think about, you know, Zion McCollum got so many reps last year because of injuries, and now that, I think, set him up to be really good this year and ready to go. So in a lot of ways, as sad as it was, I think this could be a great growing moment for those guys. And Jaylen, it's interesting. I talked to him this week, actually, for the radio pregame show, and he said the word details 5 or 6 times in his interview. I can tell that is what coaches have been working on with him, what he's been thinking about. And so I think he's focusing a lot on those details, knowing he mentioned that, you know, Baker wanting him to be exactly where he wants him to be, the details of the routes that he's running. And he also mentioned the game has been slowing down for him. And so I think that's really exciting to know that every game and every rep you get is just going to be that much better. But he did mention, hey, you know, it's a tough transition to the league. Yeah. That's a tough thing as a rookie wide receiver. But yeah, can you see, you know, are we going to find a way that the coaches set them up for success? I think Trey Palmer is going to be able to stretch the defense, take the top off with his speed. Hopefully it sets up the run game. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see the way these two guys try to step in and how Liam Cohen tries to set them up for success.
Well, Jaylen at Washington had a season or two where he played mostly on the outside, and he had another season where he played almost all in the slot. So we already know he could do that kind of thing the way Chris Godwin did. He knows both positions, so that's helpful. One more thing on Chris. At the time of his injury, he's leading the league in receptions, and it's second in yards and tied for second in touchdowns. I mean, a legitimate shot at the Triple Crown, like Cooper Kupp a couple years ago. So that's sad. He was on pace for 121 catches, and our team record is 106. Oh, so it's all that, in addition to what you said about you hate to see it happen to him because he's such a great guy and great family and everything, but it's also such a lost opportunity.
Yeah, that's very true.
It was so much fun watching him back to his peak powers this season.
Yeah, he was just killing
He'll get back there, but now everybody has to wait for a while.
He has to do
all that work.
But yeah, we know he's going to put in that work. We know he knows how to do that. So now, of course, we want to see how these wide receivers step up, but even more importantly probably now is the run game, Scott.
Yeah, it's a good thing that the run game has emerged in the last 3 weeks because we may have to lean on it a little bit more. And all last week, you know, somebody asked Todd early in the week after that New Orleans game, might we have a 3-headed monster in the backfield? So it wasn't Todd's original phrase for it, but it's kind of been adopted and everybody's saying it all week. And you think, can this really work? There was a lot of skepticism. It worked.
Yeah.
At least for one game,
really
it worked. Those guys combined for 226 yards of offense and 3 touchdowns. And Rashad, when you needed somebody to really step up in the pass game when we were playing from pretty far behind, showed what he could still do, what we saw so much last year. So I think they're going to continue to try to get all the guys involved, get them involved early, and then see who has the hot hand, or see what the game situation is and whose skills are most relevant to what's going on right then. But it may take a little while for us to get this passing game on track without Mike and Chris, and during that time we have to lean on those guys and an offensive line. Baker pointed this out. We have to lean on an offensive line that's playing really well.
Yep.
So there is one little concern, and she'll talk about it in the injuries. But Bucky's on the injury report this week.
Yeah, we'll have to head into that for sure. So, all right, we talked a lot about the offense defensively. Bree, what stands out to you from this last game?
Well, Yaya Diaby had himself a day against the Ravens, had a sack on the first defensive series, kind of came underneath on a twist, and then he also had 5 tackles, 2 for a loss. So really just kind of showcased that short area burst, the power, and then Antoine Winfield Jr. also had a sack, which brought his career total to 16 since his arrival in 2020, which is the most in the NFL by a DB during that span. Also led the Bucs in tackles, so just seeing his pursuit leverage, both of those guys had a big impact against the Ravens.
Yeah, that's great. And then, all right, so now we're going to have to get into that injury report, which is injuries this week, man. It's just so it's so sad.
Well, it's not a real long report, but that's not counting the fact that Jamel Dean.
People on IR.
Jamel Dean, Cam Johnson, and Chris Godwin put on IR. Tyke Smith in concussion protocol, and then, as Scott mentioned, Bucky Irving showed up on the Wednesday injury report with a toe injury and did not practice in the walkthrough. And then Payne Durham was also a non-participant in Wednesday's walkthrough.
Yeah, and he didn't play last week, so apparently that's a pretty significant injury.
So, but Tyke Smith will definitely be one to watch to see how he progresses in concussion protocol.
Yeah, because here we just talked about this, about the idea of these running backs and how important that's going to be. So to see, and I think they need their toes. I think that can be helpful for them for sure.
Toe injuries always don't sound like a big deal, but they are a very big deal.
Yeah,
because it's sometimes make it hard to plant and turn.
Yep, for sure. All right, so Bree, trivia for everybody. Let's get into it.
Alrighty, who was the last Buccaneer player to have 3 sacks in a single game?
I'm assuming we're not counting preseason for.
We're not counting preseason.
Jose
Probably
Ramirez.
not.
Not counting preseason.
So in other words, now that I was going
season
to know
game.
that I was going to know an answer.
Well, that's good.
We're
that
not
you
counting it.
remembered
I'm going to say for my trivia question that was the answer because I got Jose Ramirez. But yeah,
I wrote that for the regular season. If you're trying to figure it out.
All right. I'm just going to say that I took the win. But for everybody else, it is a regular season thing. All right, so later in the show, we will reveal that answer, so make sure you stick around for that. All right, so milestones. Tell me what we got, Scott.
Well, when Tavier Thomas successfully caught that bounce on the onside kick attempt, that was the first successful onside kick for the Bucs since 2013. So those don't come along very often, but I thought that kind of could lead us into a discussion about the special teams as a whole right now. And the news this week of Jake Camarda, the Buccaneers released Jake Camarda or waived him, and they promoted Trenton Gill to the active roster. It was no longer possible to keep elevating Gill on game days and then making Camarda inactive because Gill was out of elevations. You only get 3 of them.
Right.
So as Coach Bowles said, I mean, we've seen Jake Camarda hit 70, 65-yard punts with regularity. I mean, not recently, but we know he has that power. But Coach has said he's been in a slump, and it got to the point where they couldn't wait the slump out any longer. I got to believe, just like Matt Gay. Remember, and it was a good move by us. We got, I'm blanking on the kicker.
Santos? No.
No, who was our kicker during the Super Bowl season?
Oh, yes. Oh, my Lord. Just, oh my gosh, what is
All right, well, let's
Ryan
just move
Suckup.
on. There you go, Ryan Suckup.
Jeez, it's been a week, everyone.
Ryan
Monday Night
Suckup.
Football, it's got all of us a little confused.
Yeah.
Ryan Suckup.
So they decided to bring in Ryan Suckup at the last minute before that season because Matt was just a little too inconsistent right there, and they thought they had Tom Brady, and they thought they had the makings of a championship team, and one kick can give away a game. One missed kick can give away a game. So they went with Ryan Suckup because they thought he would be reliable, and he was. So it worked. It worked for the Buccaneers. But Matt Gay then went on. He's been a Pro Bowler since then. He got a huge contract with Indianapolis this year, so huge for a kicker. And so the same sort of thing could happen with Jake. And it still could be a good move for us and for him as it all turns out.
Yeah, and I do think with special teams it was, such an interesting game for so many reasons with that of the onside kick. And Tavier Thomas really has just stepped up. I feel like every time there's a big special teams play, we're not talking about the kick itself or field goal, it's Tavier Thomas. I think
that's why they signed him, to be honest with you.
And I can see why. It was very worth it.
And then Chase McLaughlin made his 30th straight field goal to extend his team record for consecutive field goals made, and then banged one off the right upright from 52 yards against the wind, which was knocking all the kickoffs down.
Long kick.
He's still 5 of 6. He's still the most accurate kicker in NFL history from that range, so just missed it by that much. And then Todd Bowles also said the kickoff coverage needs to be better.
Okay, interesting. So let's get into our fantasy watch now. I think this sort of ties in probably to what you were talking about earlier in the show as well, that the run game is not only a key for the Buccaneers moving forward, but we know that there's probably a lot of fantasy owners out there that are wondering, so this little 3-headed monster, what does this mean for maybe my one of those 3 running backs I have on my team?
Well, I think as you saw in the last one, I think Rachaad White is the safest play because of his pass catching, especially if it becomes a shootout type of game, which it was last time against Atlanta. He's the one most likely to get 4 or 5 catches for 50, 60 yards. So even if you don't score a touchdown, because that's the part that's hard to predict. Rachaad had 2 in the last game, had a great week if you started him. It's a little, probably not time yet to start Sean Tucker, I wouldn't think, because you just don't know how much he's going to get. He looked great again, but he just didn't get as many opportunities. And then Bucky would probably be touchdown dependent. So I think the safest one as a floor is Rachaad.
Yes, and then also the wide receiver group now. RIP for the people who had have Mike and Chris this week on their rosters. But so, do you think that there's a reason for people to pick up one of these other wide receivers?
Well, you got to hold on to Mike if you have him, because he's coming back this season. Probably the one I would go with and put on my bench and see how it goes is Jaylen McMillan, because I just think the passes have to go somewhere, and he seems like the guy most likely to be running a wide variety of routes like Chris Godwin did. And we thought we got a steal when we got him. Now, he hasn't been hugely productive yet, but that was as the third option. He was the third receiver with Mike and Chris. Now he's in a number 1 role. And we're hoping it goes well. You grab him now, stash him on your bench, see if he starts producing like a number 1 in a very good passing attack with a red-hot quarterback.
Right. Yeah. So now this is where we typically talk about a human interest story, something off the field, something to help you get to know the team better. And of course, quickly, we did want to touch on the fact that the Glazer family gave another $1 million to hurricane relief. They had done that after Helene. They are also now doing that after Milton. That goes to nonprofits that are helping in the recovery efforts. And I know last week we highlighted a lot about just everything the Glazer family did for the organization, the players, the staff, all of that. But then they're also stepping up in this really big way to help the community. And we just wanted to shout them out, say thank you for everything that they do. It makes us proud to work for an organization that continues to give back to the community. So wanted to highlight that for sure. And then also in terms of a player human interest story, shameless plug, this next Monday we will have Cade Otten on our player show. That is me and Cam Brate. So can't wait to watch these 2 tight ends chop it up. They also have a really fun relationship and friendship because of course Cam was here when Cade came in as a rookie, was one of the guys he was looking up to. And I just loved this story because, I feel like this was the perfect time to tell it. Cade had his new, career high in yards, first 100-yard receiving game this last week. And as we talk about people that have to step up, in light of Mike and Chris being gone, we went to the wide receivers and running backs. But I think Cade is another one that's going to have to step up a ton. And he is everybody keeps talking about how he's such this old school tight end. He doesn't wear gloves. He took those huge hits at the end of the game, still hung onto the ball. I just loved that. And he's just a little bit not the flashy kind of tight end. He really is that old school guy. And one of the stories that Cam has told me that we're going to definitely get into on the show is that for Christmas, Cade bought all the tight ends jean jackets. I think they were just Levi's jean jackets, and not fashion ones, working jackets, and then also socks. And everything about that, I just loved. That he's the guy that's you know what? I bet they need this.
You can't have too many pairs.
Here are these multi-millionaire NFL athletes, and he was like, everyone needs a good sock. And also the jean jacket. Yeah, and so Cam had mentioned
Practical.
that. Yeah. Cam just said it was so funny and so perfect coming from Cade. And then Cade heard we'd discussed this on one of our shows, and he was like, he didn't like my jacket, which I thought was so sweet. So now we have a chance to hear Cade's side on Monday, so make sure everybody tunes in to the show on Monday for that. All right, so let's get into this next week game here that we got the Falcons. It feels like we just did this. We're going to already a couple weeks later just wash, rinse, repeat of hopefully a different outcome on this one.
Yes.
And man, how important in terms of the division standings and what this could mean moving forward. So I know that Drake London was one of the guys who really hurt us in the last matchup. So Bree, tell us what stands out to you about that and what that could look like this week.
Well, in week 5, the last time around, Drake London finished with 154 yards, also had a touchdown, and really just kind of took advantage of the free access off the line. But he's a guy that just dominates the catch window, uses his size as a mismatch, kind of creates the physicality, uses that strength to kind of extend, pull in catches. So he's going to be definitely somebody that the Bucs are going to have to key in all areas of the field.
Yeah, he only had 2 catches in the first game of the season, and since then he's had at least 6 catches and at least 53 yards in every game.
Wow.
That's Chris Godwin type consistency.
It is, yeah. He's become a huge part for them. And then now, Scott, because I feel like today is just your day of talking about the run game, we decided to give you the Falcons'
I'll
run
stay in my lane.
defense. Yes, stay in your running lane. I like that. So tell me, as much as we talked about how important it's going to be for the Bucs to get the run game going, how much is the Falcons' defense going to be probably keying in on that and able to stop it?
Well, they do have some good players up the spine of that defense from front to back. They've got Grady Jarrett, who's a Pro Bowl caliber player, back from injury that cost him half of last year, playing really well again. They've got Caden Ellis, who is a guy that came over from New Orleans. In New Orleans, he was cast basically as an edge rusher, but he's playing off ball for the Falcons and is their leading tackler. They do sometimes rush him too, so he's kind of a versatile player. And they're probably the strength of their defense is at the end with Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons. And those guys just have so much experience and they're sure tacklers. So they do have the makings of what would seem like a good run defense, but the numbers haven't been great. They've been allowing 137 rushing yards per game this season, which is almost exactly what the Bucs are averaging now.
Right.
And that's because over the last 3 weeks, the Buccaneers have run for 562 yards in 3 games. We've been waiting for this for years, haven't we? And we've heard one coach after another sincerely say, we got to get the run game going.
We got to be doing this.
And then you look up at the end of the year and you're 32nd. We're not going to be 32nd this year, that's clear. Some new additions have helped a lot, like Graham Barton and Bucky Irving, of course. But obviously the scheme is working well. I think there's a lot of variety to it. And we've seen in the last couple weeks some of those gap runs with the pulling guard that was not working real well early in the season. We're kind of getting it. And that's kind of a precision play, right?
Yeah.
Guys are blocking on the move. Everybody has to do everything right. So I think they're getting it. 562 rushing yards in 3 games is the tied for the 4th most in a 3-game span in Bucs history. So we're seeing the kind of running game we've been waiting for a long time. So that could be a big part of this game against Atlanta, especially if the passing offense is trying to find its footing.
Right. And, I think that I was thinking about our run defense as well because, of course, did not go how they wanted it to against the Ravens. But, I mean, that's a story for a lot of people. Trying to stop Derrick Henry, trying to stop Lamar Jackson, that is no small task. And so maybe that says more about them than about us. But I know that the Bucs run defense has not necessarily been what they have wanted it to be or what it has been several years under Todd Bowles, where it's been, number 1 in the league several different times. Right now, we're allowing the 3rd most yards per carry. We're 21st in rushing yards allowed. But again, that's against some guys that are just, Derrick Henry ripping off an 81-yard run is going to really hurt your stats on that front. But I know that the last matchup against the Falcons, it was really Kirk Cousins throwing against us that was the demise. But man, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier are some of the best 1-2 punches in the league. And so if you don't still focus on that, even if you're really focusing on trying to stop Kirk Cousins and not give up the things you did last week, you cannot then abandon the idea of stopping Bijan and Tyler Algier because they can really gash you. And I think this could be a game that they're really going to be focusing on after it didn't go how they wanted it to against the Ravens, having this be one of those kind of get right games on your run defense to slow those guys down as well. And Bowles has said that those runs against the Ravens that didn't go how they wanted it to, he said that they were misfit from the start, that it was not about not making the play once it started. It was that before that ball was even snapped, they had misaligned on a few of those. And so that's one of those things where if you just correct some of those mental mistakes leading up to it, that I think he believes that this run defense is exactly. You got Vita in there, you got Kalijah in there together. We haven't gotten to see that all season a ton. And I think that moving forward, they're going to be able to hopefully get this right.
81 and 39-yard runs in the 4th quarter is going to mess up your rushing.
Mess up your stats.
So is playing against Lamar Jackson and some of the other rushing quarterbacks we've played. But coming into that game, the Ravens amazingly had a rushing edge advantage of 146.3 yards per game.
Yeah, that's outrageous. To even just average that many yards per game is great. And then to be over your opponent, insane.
So at halftime of that game, we were actually leading them in rushing, something like 89 to 65. So for a while it was working, but then those long runs kind of killed it.
Those long runs, I know that they had definitely held him earlier on, which is a great sign. All right, so now we are to our answer of our trivia question. What do we have here?
The answer is Devin White.
Devin White, last player to get 3
against
sacks.
Atlanta.
Yep, and now
in 2020, it was that comeback game.
And it's a timely thing to say because didn't he sign with the Texans this week?
I didn't
think
see
I saw
that.
I think
Good
I saw
for
he
him.
signed with the Texans. So it was a timely trivia question here. All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Again, enjoy Creamsicle Week. Hope to see a lot of you out there cheering the team on at home as they take on the division rival Falcons. We'll see you next week.